Hello, can people hear me? No, people can't hear me. Hi, Edwin, can you hear me? Thank you. Thanks, David. Beatrice or Edwin, are you going to get us started, or should I just start? That's not great if those in the room can't hear me. Thanks to those of you online. It's great you can hear me. We've all been very patient while those in the room have had a delicious meal. Indeed. Indeed. Maybe now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience and staying with us. It's definitely one of the most insightful days in this cold season and beyond. We will get into our third panel discussion, which is going to be moderated by Dr. Linda Waldman from the Institute of Development Studies in Sussex, the United Kingdom. Thank you very much, Doc, for joining us and steering us through this next session. We're glad to see you. On this panel, we have the following lineup, some of whom are not there yet, but we will just kick off and we are reaching out to them. In the event that they will join us, it will be excellent. So we have first of all, for context, this panel is talking about strengthening education systems in sub-Saharan Africa, I beg your pardon, pathways for pedagogical leadership in Africa. That is what the theme of this discussion is, this next session. Like I said, the moderator is Dr. Linda Waldman from the Institute of Development Studies in Sussex in the UK. Then the panelists are Dr. Abubakar Moki, who's the Commissioner for Policy Development and Capacity Building in the Office of the President of Uganda. We have Professor Samuel Agiei Mensah, Director, the Center for Teaching and Learning Innovation, University of Ghana. Professor Suleiman Abdul Karim, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ilorin, which is in Nigeria. Then we have Professor Mike Kuria, the Deputy Executive Secretary in the Inter-University Council of East Africa. Then we have Professor Pai Obanya, Technical Advisor for Reform Implementation for the Reform Implementation Committee of the Federal Ministry of Education, that's in Nigeria. He is also the former director, UNESCO Regional Office for Education in Africa. And last but not least on our panel is Honorable Judith Achan, Member of Parliament in Uganda. So I'd like to hand over to Dr. Linda Waldman, and just to point out some of the panelists are not online yet, but just as a check, I'd like to confirm that we have Dr. Abubakar Moki. Is yes, Dr. Abubakar Moki there?
Yes, I'm around. Yes, welcome back for the nice lunch.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Doc. We're glad to have you with us. Do we have Professor Samuel Agay Mensah? Is Prof. Agay Mensah there? Professor Suleiman Abdul Karim from Nigeria. We have Professor Mike Kuria from the Inter-University Council of East Africa. Professor Payo Banya from Nigeria. I'm not sure the tech team if this is still okay, much as the just to ensure that we can still see and communicate with the panel and the moderator on the Zoom platform. Just confirm as a viewer on the Zoom. I think mine had signed out, but I will be getting back in a bit. So, and Honorable Judith Achan. From Uganda, who's a member of parliament in Uganda. So as I log in, good, I can see Dr. Waldman. Maybe I just let you pick it up from there, then we can see as we try and get the rest of the panelists in to have this conversation, Doc.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Can everyone in the room hear me?
Perfectly well.
Perfectly well, brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much. It's a huge privilege to be here, and it's been a huge privilege to be part of PedaL right from its inception and to watch it grow and to see it achieve over the years. So it's lovely to be here. And I have a very distinguished but somewhat absent lineup of speakers for today. So I'm going to say very little and hand over to our speakers, hopefully as they come online. I just wanted to start off by saying that thinking about the pathways for pedagogical leadership in Africa is incredibly important, and thinking about how we strengthen our educational systems. And in the session before lunch, we heard a huge amount of just how much appetite there is for this, just how ready people seem to feel for it, or feel that we need this anyway, even if we aren't ready for it. So it's a very exciting time for PedaL. It's a very exciting agenda for PedaL. And it's something that we look forward to seeing and reaping the benefits of. So if I can hand over now to Dr. Morkey. And Dr. Morkey, if everyone had been online, I would have said you could have 6 minutes to talk. But given that we're waiting for some of the others, maybe we could just see how it goes. And if our other speakers come, they could let me know in the chat, or maybe Simon, Edward, if you could let me know, that would be brilliant. So Dr. Morkey, over to you first. And Dr. Morkey, can you unmute yourself, please? The little button.
Yes. Yeah, sorry for that. Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, so good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much for the opportunity. In the limited time, I'm going direct to my contribution. Here, we'd like to discuss how best we can strengthen education systems in South Africa for the base pathway. So my first input is we need integrated educational policies. Now, most of our policies are not integrated, and that's why people talk of lack of funding. There's limited funding. Some people are not coming on board so fast. All this is because of disjointed policies. So if we could have integrated policies, which look at both soft and hard skills, and then they're also able to bring all the stakeholders on board in the value chain of education. So PedaL will be very, very much appreciated. So that's one suggestion I'm putting across, that we need to emphasize on integrated education policy. Then two, there's also need for integrated implementation if we are really to strengthen education systems. Now, currently, you find that most of their silos, the implementations, generally sectors, people operate in silos, and that constrains implementation, because where there are silos, Then there are institutional fights. Even within organizations, within institutions, we find there are departmental fights and so on. So if we are really to succeed, there's integrated implementation, and that's where we can have this PedaL being properly enhanced. Here we can bring on board the private sector, the civil society organization, the communities, and then of course the universities that are providers of knowledge and carrying out research. So integrated implementation is very, very key if we are to really strengthen education systems of Africa as the pathway for PedaL. That's very key. Then the third point that I would like to share is on coming up with digital innovation plans. Now, most of our higher institutions of learning don't have digital innovation plans. We are now in the era of digitalization, so we need to make sure that the plans are in place so that we regularly update our systems. So that is this of saying that there's internet failures, some people cannot be online, at times they are offline, all that can be addressed in terms of digital innovation plans. Now, under that, of course, you'll find that education services innovations will be key. We keep on innovating services under that plan. And then the issue of data revitalization is very key, because you cannot talk about digitalization without revitalized data. It's very, very key. Issue of advancement of learners' engagement platforms. They have to be very, very key. Because if they are advanced, especially with the youth, they like social media, they like online things. So saying that really the young generation is not coming on board, that shows that there's a problem, and that problem can be addressed through digital innovation plans. Then also establishing a smart work environment of the service providers, especially learner. That's part of the digital innovation plans. And then revitalization of cloud and digital infrastructure, it's very key. And then lastly, establishment of an ecosystem of data, or public data, and to know what data goes in public and which one is not. So those are the components of the digital innovation plans, which are really very, very key. That should be put on. Then in the 2 minutes that I'm left with, because I was given 6 minutes, let's look at the last point. The last point is focusing on society problems and not publication for the sake of it. Now, higher institution of learning, times they talk of giving to the community and doing research, then give the community. Find the state they are looking about just information dissemination and so on. But if there is a deliberate approach of society, addressing society problems, you identify society problem, and then we take it through. If we are talking about, for example, want to improve the well-being of a given community, we do research, come up with intervention, good monitoring, follow it up, so that there's change, not just research, dissemination, findings, publication, sharing knowledge, and so they should extend to that. So that's why I'm saying that the fourth point is focusing on addressing society in a practical way, not just researching on the practical problem, but creating change. So those are the key 4 points that I wanted to concentrate on: integrated educational policies, 2, integrated implementation, 3, digital innovation plan, and then lastly, focusing on addressing society. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And if time is there, we could continue engaging. Thank you.
Gosh, thank you so much, Dr. Mulki. That's an excellent summary and really well put together and really succinct. So thank you so much. And I can't agree with you more on the importance of doing research that is about understanding societal problems and making a difference, rather than just about publication for publication's sake. So really brilliant. I hope you'll stay, and I hope we'll have a bit of a conversation in the time that we have left. So it's with a real privilege now that I can ask Professor Pai Obanya to also give us his presentation. And Professor Pai, I hope you were here in time to hear your very nice introduction as well. But you have already been introduced to the audience.
Okay, I hope you can hear me.
We can, thank you so much.
Well, first to say that as a pedagogue, I'm happy to be involved in pedaling. And congratulations to the initiators. This is the third time I'm being involved. And secondly, to say that the function of technical advisor I did some 20 years ago. I'm simply emeritus professor at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. But 7 quick points. Point number 1 is to remind everyone that we're not talking strictly of the school system, we're talking of the educational system. Education has always existed with human beings. Schooling is a relatively recent innovation. And this education is anywhere you are acculturating people, harnessing their potentials and nurturing these potentials for their own self-actualization and for service to community. It is both a lifelong, meaning the older you get, you're learning, and a life-wide, meaning the more you open up your horizons, the more qualitatively you are improving. And there is nobody who is exempted from it, from the toddler to people in their 80s like me, and to my mother who is still alive at 97. Education goes on. And we talk of schooling, which is a confusion. There are 4 converging and interlocking routes to education. The one that comes all the time is incidental. When this machine doesn't function, it teaches me a lesson. Incidental education. That's informal. We're going about life with our normal business, and we are learning because we're always changing the way we do things. And there's a non-formal, when you sort of formalize that informal. That is, out of the normal classroom, the African apprenticeship system, and the rest of it, the daughter working with the mother in the kitchen, and the son working with the father on the farm, in the field. When you institutionalize this sort of, you're being non-formal. But then when you now have schools with fixed curricula, inspectors, teachers, examinations, selection, all that, you have the formal system. But I say they are interlocking, because even in the strictly formalized systems, you still have to use methodologies that are peculiar to the other ways of doing it. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is that we are fixing the problems of education. That's what the heading says. And for you to fix a problem, it helps to apply the problem tree approach. That is, if this tree, the leaves of this tree are withering, I do not apply the solution to the leaves, because those represent just the mere surface manifestations. I go down to the root. So in talking about education then, and strengthening the system, we have to go to the root causes of what has not been working. And in my work, because I always say what education has taught me about education, I have come to develop, and I use this every day, a value chain for the education system. And this value chain is a cyclic mode that has 5 pivotal points, which I call the 5 P's, like the letter P in my name. The first point, if you can take your notes and try to draw a diagram for me, just write a capital P on top of your sheet of paper. And that P stands for politics. And you draw an arrow to the next P, which you call policy. And you draw an arrow to the next one, which you call program, an arrow to the next one, processes, an arrow to the next one, product, and you can go on to politics. What I'm saying here is that politics is at the root of it all. It determines everything else. And most policies will emanate from the nature of politics, the methodology of politics. And politics itself will determine policy itself will determine what people translate into programs of education. And programs haven't been translated in whatever form, some institutions, some human beings have to make it happen. That is the processes. And why are we doing all this? We're expecting outcomes, which is the product. We often make the mistake of taking the product and saying, not looking for where the problem started. If young ones are not getting jobs, where did it start? If they are even failing in normal examinations, where did it start? If teachers are not motivated, where did it start? And if education is not properly funded, where does it start? So if we take out this value chain, at every point on a value chain, you have value movers, those interventions that will make a positive difference. At the same time, what you are changing are the value obstructors. If you put it, if the teachers were not competent, they are obstructors. If you make them competent, they become movers. So let's go quickly through the value chain. I will only emphasize those things we have to do in order to change, to move. In politics, there's a problem of short-term vision. They need a school in this environment, and I cite a school. And we know that citing a school is not the same thing as establishing a school. When you have a long-term vision, the politics helps the coming generation. When you have a short term, you are saying, what is the need for me? So people clap for you. In Africa, we dance for you and call you by some name, and then it ends there. 2 years later, it's gone. And this is because of the prevalence of a political culture that says what is the need for me and not what is the need for this future generation. Now, coming to policy, there is the wrong perception of policy as a document. Ladies and gentlemen, the document is just a skeleton. The real policy is what has been internalized by participants in the process of developing a policy. And because it's like that, we intend to make it top down. I'm not a supporter of top down, but I'm also not even a supporter of bottom up. I'm a supporter of side. You know, in traditional Africa, how did I learn to rear cattle? I stood by my grandfather and copied. This day and age, how do I learn even to use this computer? I call in somebody who didn't even go to school and say, Daddy, can you do this and that and that? And he keep correcting. Side, which is what innovative teaching also does. And. Somebody came to Africa once, and when he goes back, he wrote a book titled Planning Without Figures. So our policy goes into a plan that is not data-driven, that is not evidence-supported. And we form the habit of about 2 million people, even about 2, because we're just not precise about anything. And it pays for political immediate gain not to have any listen. So to have evidence-driven plans that are also strategic in nature and long-term effectiveness and all the rest of it well programmed. It's one of those things that we have to change. And of course, when it comes to making policy, it has been government only or an elite class, those of us sitting in this hotel, forgetting that the real need bearers have no access to Nairobi City or to this hotel. So the need bearers have never been involved like the early evangelists did in Africa. He or she sat with the people, tried to understand how they do their thing, and slightly got them doing. So what we have had has been education for them and not for us. And that's why our own children will go to private schools and be educated abroad. And what we need is education for all of us. And this all of us has to take care of the genuine stakeholders, the ordinary person in the streets, in the bush, and so on, are the need bearers, not my own grandchildren who've been to private schools, and not the professor who can prophesize the way I'm talking. I'm only a peripheral stakeholder, because if it falls down, I go abroad. So, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of policy, we'll stop this being handing down. We'll make it more participatory, so that the people can internalize it and call it our job and our program and not theirs. Because we have not done this, we've had a series of policy somersaults. Next January, everybody should go to school at 8. 2 weeks later, we say, not make it 8, make it 8:30. It's because it's not been truly thought out using the people who know what we don't know. And when it comes to the processes, which is where this discussion has been, the first mistake we've made about the process is funding. I make a distinction between merely spending on education and genuinely investing in education. If I create a separate ministry for basic education, separate one for higher education, separate for technical education, I'm merely spending money. But if I devote this money to improving what PedaL has been doing, and this will have effect, what do you call it, tangible effects on the future, I am investing. So we should now, the turnaround is said to go from the culture of merely throwing money at education, spending, saying we spent 20 billion, we voted 20 billion, but what has the 20 billion done? That is the investment. And. How do you become a manager of education? You've been teaching 5 years, 10 years, or you are married to an influential person. The next day you become an inspector. The next day you become a manager in the system. Even to be a headmaster, we need professionalization because management is not an easy process. And we need to have people who have talent for managing, not just you may be an excellent classroom teacher and be a woeful manager. And we've not talked about that. And for this to work. And what we call curriculum, we tend to treat as Bible. Go ye and do likewise. We forget that the teacher is the game changer. It is what teachers and head teachers do that really determines the outcome. And so if we don't involve them in the process of curriculum packaging, we only will have a package, but we not have something that teachers can handle. And there's a question of number and quality of teachers. We have used to people-teacher ratio, PTR, but we are not used to qualified, competent, committed teacher ratio. Because to have the qualification, paper qualification doesn't mean that you are competent, doesn't mean you can be creative and so on. And you can only do this when you have a program of systematic teacher development. And what is the dominant pedagogy? The dominant pedagogy is knowledge acquisition, not knowledge exploration. And what you've been teaching in PedaL is knowledge exploration, where we go in, what does it look like? Can you see it? What do you say it is? And that engagement goes on so that a good discussion never comes to an end, so that when children get out of the class, they are saying, what about this? What about that? And that's how application comes. And I'll end the button because you let me rush through to materials and technology and all that, you know about that. The materials at a sorry state. And these include infrastructure and so on. And what do? We have to bring education to the school by making the infrastructures and all that workable. And what is technical? And what way do we go in, and whatever we're doing, let's remember it is education, not schooling. So whatever is happening in the informal sector has to be taken care of. And that is not simply adult literacy. It is you and I at our level, we always have learning needs. When we do provide it, we have a learning society, and the learning society will support an education system that lasts. And very, very finally, if PedaL has to continue, because it's done a good job, and we said pathways, which means you cannot do everything. I think the first philosophy is to sharpen the focus of what has been done already. And one suggestion has been given. Can we sort of download what we've done to the institutional level and give technical, financial, pedagogical support to the few for the few centers of excellence in teaching and learning that exist in the continent, so that the gospel can be spread? Because jumping into upscaling, you don't jump into upscaling, you go stepwise. So stepwise upscaling by building capacity at the institutional level will be fantastic. And one thing we must do is go to the online. Technology has come to stay. But ladies and gentlemen, you need to be in line to be online. And we should all do the efficacy, advocacy for society to make us in line by providing the necessary things and deploying them, and also training us, because it's nice to have software and hardware. What about the humanware? And I think teacher education should involve this technological humanware development. If we go along this way I think, ladies and gentlemen, the change process, and I mean positive change process that PedaL has started will continue and will go around the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Banya. Thank you. So lots of really nice points there, but also picking up on the need for digital innovation, as Dr. Morki said initially, but also I really love this idea of reminding us that we can keep learning until we're 97 and we can have lifelong learning and peer-to-peer learning and education for all. Really, really important principles. Thank you so much, Professor Abanya, and my apologies as a junior member for asking you to keep to time, but thank you so, so much. We're now going to go on to Honorable Judith Achan, who's a member of parliament in Uganda. Judith, can you unmute and talk? Maybe you can't unmute. You were with us earlier. Have you left us? No sense of Judith. Okay, well, why don't I take...
She's dropped out, so we
Yeah.
can just move without her.
So why don't I see if anyone in the room or in the chat would like to say anything? If you're online, please please raise your hand online. And if you're in the room, maybe equally raise your real hand rather than your picture hand. There's lots of very positive comments going into the chat. Would anyone like to ask a question or reflect or respond to anything that's been said so far? I don't see any. Oh, is that a hand? No hands are raised. Is anyone in the room have a hand raised? And these are important issues and we need to discuss them as well. And we need to see how they can help us and work for us. So there's lots of praise going into the chat.
You have a comment here in the room?
Yes,
Okay.
I have a question for Dr. Moki. You illustrated elaborately what we need to do for digital innovation. Might you share your experience with Uganda? How far have you gone with digital innovation? Thank you.
That's a brilliant question. Thank you. Dr. Moki, can you respond?
Yes, I can respond. Yes. Yeah, we have Ministry of Information, Communication Technology and National Guidance. And then we also have the National Information Technology Authority of Uganda. These two institutions are spearheading digital transformation in the country. We have come up with the policy frameworks in place and engage in different ministries, departments, agencies, including some higher institutions of learning to ensure that this happens. So we are moving online in all areas. So this is and Uganda is one of the areas that members can benchmark. These two institutions are really doing great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Abanya, do you also want to come in and talk about the digital innovation? You have to unmute again. Thank you so much, Dr. Moki.
You're welcome.
There we go.
Yes, I'm passionate about this, and I think without digital transformation, I wouldn't even be here. Perhaps I wouldn't have been as active as I have been. All I'm saying is that you don't just first of all, you have to have a guiding policy that has been said before. Secondly, you have to put in charge those who know how things are being done so that you don't just import, but you also acculturate people to behave. And thirdly, that digitalization goes beyond the machines. There's also a mindset that goes with it. Because if you've been to some shops in Africa, some banks, the machines are there, and yet the delay is still there. Because the mind, as I always say, has not been computerized. So I think there's a lot of human being humanware development, as I said, to go along with the ICT deployment. And of course, when you use it for teaching in a university and learning, it must also go into other things. The planning of the work of the university, the day-to-day and overall management, even the conduct of meetings and so on. The ways of reporting and all. So it has to be integrated into the overall activity of our institutions, and society at large must also provide that opportunity. At least in my own society, it just happens that those who use the phones, and even there's even a computer village in Lagos that attracts every tourist, and yet the boys and girls who work there did not have the formal education we have. So it is because they are using it in real life. So they have to be used in real life, used in government business, used in the private sector, human, as I said, capacity development to adjust and use and even contribute to the development.
And there's a comment in the chat about the whole idea of side-by-side approach being very useful for online teaching as well, and online learning as well. Thank you so much, Professor Abanya. I think you're so right about the importance of this digital space. Anyone else would like to add or say anything or challenge? Is the pathway for pedagogical leadership just this digital space? We've all learned over the last 2 years new ways of doing things, new ways of interacting. All of us here today are here because of the online space, but is our pathway to futures educational systems and strengthened educational systems just online? Or what about the rest of it? What about everything we've done today? Does anyone else want to comment, reflect, ask questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Albert from Uganda Matters University. I'd like to thank the professors in there and the PASGR team for equipping us with the education technologies. I'd like to mention that we all have to read the signs of the times that education technologies are going to be very vital in the future of education. And in this discourse on digital innovation, the professor from Uganda has mentioned how government is working through some of these agencies and ministries to work on these technologies. But borrowing from the recent experience during the pandemic, we note that the educational institutions have been left to work alone. And even when you would expect that probably the taxes are reduced, all other ways of forming synergies to work with these institutions to supporting them. I know we are talking of policies, but we also know many good policies, especially in Uganda, don't translate into action. I think there is an urgent need at the level of practice to help the education institutions. I intentionally call them education institutions because I want to include even the lower education institutions at primary and secondary level. I think there is a lot, when you travel to other continents, they have really beefed their internet wherever you move, and then the educational technologies are used maybe more widely. I think we need to do something about it. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much to that speaker. I'm sorry, I didn't see who you were. I wonder if we can have one more comment from the floor, either online or from the room, before we hand back to our two experts to give us another thought. There's been quite a bit in the chat about the side-by-side model and the importance of side-by-side and peer-to-peer learning, which is something we do so well in PedaL, and which is brilliant. But there've also been questions about how we involve learners into this process. And I think something that was mentioned earlier, which was very nice, was the importance of internalizing things. And I think part of what the pedagogical model does is it really helps us to internalize a new style of learning and a new style of education as well. But before I hand back to our two expert speakers, is there anyone else who would like to add any thoughts, any ideas? This is your moment. Now is your time.
Even as we hope to get some comments, if there's anyone here who has a comment or question, you could raise your hand and I will bring the microphone to you. But as we do that, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of our chief guest, who is Dr. Julius Juan, who's the Principal Secretary in the State Department of Early Learning and Basic Education. And he is a great resource for this conversation. Aside from the office he holds, he holds a PhD in educational leadership and management. And so you see how it fits into the context of the conversations we've been having here. And he's published widely on educational leadership and management in international journals and book chapters. So thank you for joining us, Bona PS. We should get the recording of the morning sessions for you to go and watch at your free time. We believe you have free time. Because there's been a lot of great insight from these good people who are in this space, and a lot of insight that could go well to give value to the government's efforts to do the same. And we shall be having the PS speaking to us later. So is there anybody on the floor who may have a question or comment, or online? Online, I can see a couple of comments. Dr. Linda, if there is no one, maybe I could read a few of the comments.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Is there a hand up anywhere here?
I don't think so.
What I'll do, let me read some of the comments. With the FCA Wanoi, who's from Ghana, says, Professor Obanya, thank you so much. This is coming together of wisdom, knowledge, and technology. Daniel Kitonga, the idea of side-by-side approach is wonderful, as well as being in line while considering the online possibility. Considerations for the human is vital. Surely, this is very deep reflection. Michael Walimbwa says, I think it is ignoring the side-by-sided model that has failed us. We have Tahira Mohammed saying, thanks so much, Prof, and all the panelists. The aspect of politics to be underlying factor is fundamental. Politicians in most African countries indicate education for all in their manifestos, and when the government proposed tax on solar energies, the same politicians failed to protect such a move. And we know how access to electricity or stroke internet created inequality during the move to online learning. We have far much to learn, and I really like the idea of the 5 Ps. Then we have...
while you wait, maybe, we have a hand up as well.
Nansamba Hadija, who says, thanks, Dr. Moki, for the precise and concrete presentation. Margaret Njeru says, the point here is learning is lifelong. It is not limited to the time when you're in a learning institution, that is a school or otherwise. Then we have Dr. Temidayo E. Omoni says the substructure of PedaL is strong. No wonder the superstructure is excellent. Thank you. And
Brilliant.
We have Adesola Odole, who says self-centered political culture that doesn't support the internalization of policies that are not evidence-based. So just basically saying, this is the way to go. And the last comment I'll read is by Professor Kinoti saying, Professor Pei, I like this. Side-by-side innovative education approach is the way to go for Africa. So I will hand you back to Dr. Linda Waldman, maybe for a closing round of comments, then we can invite our chief guest to address us. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. So before we have a closing round, Benan Tuna Mosika wanted to say something from the chat group. I think he's online. So Benan, if you can unmute yourself. No? Yes? Go ahead. We can't hear you, Benan.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. My comment was about how we are talking about the pedagogy in online learning. In that, for what we are looking at is presenting what we have always been doing in our normal way, offline in our classes. I guess most of us were taught in our normal ways under the normal pedagogy. And now we are looking at how can we present all this online as a medium. So, you know, putting aside the excitement of being on the internet, and then we access a lot of information using technologies which make our life simple, we should also be able to reflect, how have we been doing all this stuff before? What were we doing best, and what were we doing worst? Because most of the professors, most of the people who taught us, they learned the normal way, and some of them were amazing. So what I want to make sure that we don't confuse is the excitement we get when we see a lot of materials being made for online viewing, and then we think that is a great work we have done. They have been available somewhere. We've made them simple to be accessed by everyone. So we should also be able to say, if there are people who can be amazingly good offline, and how can we help them to make their materials available online? And what we should focus on is, can we make these available for everybody instead of fidgeting to make things for, I teach physics at Makerere University, and I wouldn't want to have materials made in Ghana. Someone is teaching the course their way, someone in Tanzania, someone in Nairobi. Why can't we have materials from people who know how to make them more easily understandable, and we have a platform to make them available for the whole of the continent, if not the whole world? MIT does it. The MIT Open Courseware, they have the amazing professors. I have one who is my role model called Professor Walter Lewin. He's a superstar on YouTube. And if we can make sure these materials are well made by people who are passionate, and then they are available for the continent, we wouldn't be inventing the wheel at every corner of the continent. We would have amazing people who have understood the stuff, they have made these materials, and we only customize them for our local understanding. So that's what I wanted to contribute. We shouldn't see, just because now things are available online, and then we look at technology innovation as being involved as an amazing stuff. A policy that was there when we were using textbooks and the like, making learning lesson plans and the like, and now we are talking of e-portfolio. The word e-portfolio shouldn't amaze us. The word report on a learning management system shouldn't look something new. The quiz we find on Moodle on a learning management system shouldn't take away from how we used to do chemistry multiple choice questions. So that's what I wanted to bring up on table.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you. So Professor Pai Obanya, if you could go first and maybe respond to some of what's been mentioned on the floor, maybe about this idea of drawing and learning from each other, making stuff available to everyone. And then after you, Dr. Abu Bakar Moki, we will give you a chance as well. So Professor Pai, if you're happy to go first, please.
Yes, just one sentence on technology. Technology in whatever we're doing will be an enabler, not an usurper. In other words, whatever technology can do, like our old teachers of audiovisual aids did, even storytelling did, to make things easier for everyone of us. Yes, let's apply technology. But the mention has been made about blended teaching, which means and does not rule out the application of technology as an enabler, as a facilitator, if you like, does not rule out the role of that, the facilitating role of that teacher. The teacher himself or herself has to know where technology should come in, which type of technology, and how this can be employed, employed both in and out of the classroom to ensure that those you teach have learned something. So that is one point about that. But as for side, I'm an advocate of that for so many reasons. One, that was what was done in traditional education, even among the Eskimos, not just among the Africans. When you learn from your siblings, when you learn from your parents, when you learn from your neighbors, nobody sat you down to deliver a lecture. Nobody said, close your eyes, let me demonstrate. You did everything together. And this day and age, we still have the bulk of our people working under the informal economic system and also learning. And the way they learn their entrepreneurship is not to teach the psychology of entrepreneurship. They imbibe this psychology through action, through following the footsteps of others. And my own teaching has always been like that, even long before now. Sit in the middle of graduate or 200 students and take them into 5, 10 groups, and we start planning lessons and they will learn from each other. That work better. The students still remember you because you didn't take the microphone to say, this is how to plan a lesson. When you do that, you are dictating and you are doing what they call face-to-face, and people merely memorize, sometimes wrongly. But if you engage through side, nobody is a superior person. We're all learning. People internalize so that what they used to do, they do differently. And they also be educating you yourself. It happens in this type of meeting, for example. What I did not think about, somebody else says it. If I'd merely spoken and people wrote notes, nothing would have happened. But to come back to a way to scale up, I will still maintain, we've tried it all over Africa, that because it has succeeded as a small experiment of 3 years, we're now broadening the scope. Believe you me, there's a contextual aspect we are missing. That contextual aspect is the human being. They can also be the abstractors. And the way to get them involved gradually is to get them convinced that they become your disciples in propagating this. So I would suggest that we select, and I say we because I think I'm part of PedaL, to continue pedaling because PedaL doesn't stop at one step. We identify institutions that are already working. We strengthen them, and part of the strengthening will be to bring in Africans from other places to learn so that when they go back, they can also propagate. Because I've been part of 4 external funded projects. And because we did not go this way, when the funding ends, the project disappears. And the next generation will not even know what we've been doing. Kenya would have, those who were there in 1979 will remember me with KIE and African Curriculum Organization. Where are those things now? Because when the German Foundation stopped funding, that was the end of it. But if we capacity means we are getting, we're building our successors who in future will do things in a better way and be able to follow up because technology is not static. It is by the day, and we need the mindset that will also be there to join in developing it. I'm sorry for your time.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Professor Paya Banya. And you are absolutely right. We need to build a movement of people who are all doing PedaL and using it in the way forward. Dr. Abubakar Moki, it's over to you for the next bit.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mine is short. What I want to indicate is that we now need to document some best practices and share, because something's already happening in terms of integrated policies, in integrated implementation, digital innovation plans, planning. All these things are now in place in some countries or some institutions, but at different levels. So my final suggestion is if we could take a step to identify these best practices in these institutions, document them and share. Like in terms of digital transformation, Uganda would be one of the areas we could visit.